Hey guys, Salúd here, back to give you part 4 of my Healing Heroic Antorus Guide. In this video, I'll be going over Heroic Aggramar and Heroic Argus. If you missed any of my other videos, parts 1, 2, and 3, I will have links in the description below. These bosses have a lot going on for healers, so let's just get right into this. So first up is Heroic Aggramar, and this encounter starts with your raid spreader on the platform and your tank stacked up on a designated marker, splitting auto attack. From healers specifically, it's important that we heal up Scorching Blaze targets, as well as anybody who they may have splashed on, as this ability does splash damage within a small radius. It's also important that we both dodge Wake of Flame and also heal up anybody who was hit by it, as it does leave a pretty nasty dot on them. Even on Heroic, it does tick for quite a bit of damage. During Tasha-like technique, as a healer, we want to stack on our designated marker and split the damage of Flame Rend. And it's important that we get back there, because remember, there are 2 Flame Rends during Tasha-like technique. So you want to use a personal cooldown here if you're low, healing up the raid, and then also any movement ability you have to get out of the Searing Tempest, I believe it's called, after the fact. So at a certain percentage, Aggramar will shroud himself in flame and spawn a bunch of ads around the platform, as well as 2 big ads that your tanks need to pick up and spread 15 yards from each other, or they'll empower each other and deal even more ticking damage than they already will be doing to your raid. It's important as healers that we contribute to CCs when we can. So Druid's Entangling Root, I drop an incap totem on my Shaman, Hodge on Paladin. Paralysis is great on a Monk, and unfortunately priests don't have anything to deal with this, as Shackle Undead does not work on elementals. Important note for Paladin is that Repentance will not work on elementals, so while it seems like it'd be a great talent to take, I wouldn't recommend taking it. Raid cooldowns, as far as healers go, are going to be very important in this phase, as every single time an elemental hits the shield or the boss, if you happen to spill over into phase 2, it will do quite a bit of damage and leave a pretty nasty dot on the whole raid. So you'll want to make sure you're communicating with your other healers as to if you plan on using a big raid cooldown during the next explosion. So phase 2 is identical to phase 1, except for that there's an additional mechanic called Flare, and that's just a zone of lava on the ground that people will have to move out of, or they'll take a very high burst of damage, likely killing them. What makes this phase a little more difficult is that you're still dealing with the ads likely during from the intermission. So you'll want to know that if Flame Rend is coming up and you're about to have an ad hit, you want to make sure you have a strong raid cooldown going, if not a personal for yourself, as the damage coming out is substantial on Heroic. So you'll have to pay very close attention during Tasha-like technique, as well as if people are taking Wake of Flame damage, spot healing them up will be vital to your raid success. So if you successfully navigate all the mechanics in phase 2, you will reach the second intermission, which is exactly the same as the first intermission, only you'll be dealing with Wake of Flames while everything else is going out. So you'll have to keep an eye on anybody who does not dodge Wake of Flames and starts taking the ticking damage, as the damage can be quite substantial, and if you add on the Wake of Flames ticking damage to them, it can be lethal. So just keep an eye on anybody with that dot, and you should just keep your same strategy for phase 1. Upon exiting the second intermission, you'll now enter the last phase of the fight, which is extremely similar to phase 2, only that the flares are now empowered. And so empowered flares, when they detonate, also trigger a Wake of Flame event, in which players will have to dodge a total of 9 blades that go around the platform from the 3 individual flares. Other than that, this fight is exactly the same in the final phase as it was in phase 2. You'll just need to keep an eye on anybody taking extra Wake of Flame damage. So something to consider for this boss is that, given the high item level of a lot of raid teams and the high DPS that leads to, it's actually possible during the second intermission for the little lads just to CC each of them and keep them CC'd and then ignore them. And then you just burn the boss before they get their full energy and explode and wipe the raid. You have 3 minutes from the start of the ad spawning to kill the boss, and I've killed this now 4 separate times, and in only one group, when we had 3 people dead, was it close to actually wiping us. So if you feel your DPS is high, you can just CC all the ads, lust, and kill the boss. It completely negates having to deal with the exploding ad damage from them reaching the boss. Just call out if any CCs are broken and burn the boss and win. So something to note for Paladins specifically is that we are considered melee for this fight, and that we are not targeted by flares, empowered flares, or Scorching Blaze. So it is safe to stand in the melee pack, getting that mastery healing up, and then dodging Wake of Flames like any other melee would. For talent specifically, I would recommend taking Bestow Faith on this fight. Light's Hammer is okay if you have a big melee pack and there's a lot of damage going out. If you do take Light's Hammer, do not drop it. I don't feel it's worth during Taishalek technique, as you'll get knocked back and out of the heal. Rule of Law is great because this platform is enormous, and keeping range on everybody on the platform through Rule of Law is extremely powerful, as well as upping the mastery healing that it gives. I would, as I mentioned earlier, Repentance is kind of a bait. You can't Repentance Elementals, so don't bother taking it. Take either of the other two are fine. I personally take Fist of Justice. Devotion or Sacrifice are going to be much stronger for you on this fight than Mercy will be. Either the damage reduction during Taishalek technique, or if you have two ads that are about to go off quick back to back, Devotion Aura can save the raid. Or of Sacrifice, however, is great in healing up the raid after damage is taken, so it's a personal preference, as I've said many times in this series. I would recommend taking Holy Avenger on this fight. It's going to do a ton of healing for you, especially when combined with Tears Deliverance. Judgmental Light is amazing on this fight. And then Beacon of Faith is also amazing because both tanks will be taking damage because they share auto attack. So after Heroic Aggramar, we move on to the last boss of the instance, Argus the Unmaker. This is a 4-phase fight, and in phase 1, probably the biggest mechanic to deal with is Cone of Death. It's a cone attack that does a big burst of damage to anybody caught in it, and also does a substantial amount of ticking damage through Death Fog that's left behind. So you'll want to be sure to get out of the way first off, and then be sure to heal anybody who gets hit by it, as they will die extremely quickly. So it's up to your raid to move as a team to keep the space open in phase 1. Also in phase 1 are Soul Blight debuffs. So Soul Blight will be a ticking dot on a player that after a set amount of time, they will spawn a pool of Death Fog under them. So it's important that these players are spot healed. And also keep an eye on them if Cone of Death is about to attack, because for some reason people with this debuff don't move when Cone of Death is coming. I've noticed every single time if you have Soul Blight, they think they have to eat the Cone of Death. So make sure you're very ready for this. Sacrifice or Guardian Spirit or any sort of external cooldown on these players, it seems, is necessary because people just won't move when they have Soul Blight. Also, a benefit of this phase is Gilganeth's blessings that he puts on players. After a short time, they will drop a colored orb, either a white orb, which gives haste or verse, 5% stacking, or dark blue crit mastery. So as a paladin, I always grab the dark blue, as crit mastery is amazing. These stack and do last into the next phase. So when he goes to transitions, if you haven't picked up one, go run over one quick, and it'll carry for 30 seconds into the next phase. The last mechanic to deal with in phase 1 is Tormented Burst, and Argus will just deal a flat amount of damage to everybody in the raid pretty frequently, and this lines up a lot with Cone of Death, which is another reason to keep an eye on people getting hit by Cone of Death. Because if Cone of Death happens, they don't move, they get hit by it, they have the Death Fog debuff, and Tormenting Burst goes out, and you haven't healed them, they're going to die. So it's just important that before Tormenting Burst happens, you keep an eye on everybody's health and top of anybody who might be low. So in phase 2, the biggest mechanic for healers to deal with are the Soul Burst or Soul Bombs, and these are debuffs placed on players which after a short amount of time will explode, dealing fall-off damage to the raid. So as a healer, it's really important that you keep an eye on when these are about to explode, as anybody who is low will probably die, because this actually does quite a bit of damage, especially if players are lazy and don't get all the way to the markers that your raid has set. So if Soul Burst or Soul Bomb is about to explode, make sure that you have a personal running if you're low, or you're able to spot heal anybody who might die from the mechanic. Other than that, there's not much going on in phase 2 for healers. The Edge of Obliterations that are spawning around the room, which are the spinning scythes that swing across the room, are extremely easy to dodge. So after you deal with the phase 2 mechanics, you will transition into phase 3, where all the spectral ads spawn around the outside of the room. There isn't that much healing to do in this phase unless your raid isn't doing the mechanics properly. So you want to make sure that your DPS, or you, if you're a Resto Shaman, are not interrupting anything but Cosmic Beacon. If you interrupt any of the other casts, it will lead to them not being able to be interrupted. So you'll just want to make sure that nobody's interrupting anything except for Cosmic Beacon. If you don't interrupt Cosmic Beacon, it does a substantial amount of damage to the raid, and the effects of Cosmic Beacon, which are a pretty nasty hitting dot after initial burst of damage, stack. So if you miss several interrupts in a row, it could pretty easily lead to a wipe, as the amount of damage going out then would be pretty substantial. So after a while in this phase, Norgannon will mark vulnerabilities on some of the ads. And it's important to know as a healer which of these ads is vulnerable to your type of damage. So I like to find the holy one since I'm a holy paladin main. And then you can actually add quite a bit of damage to the encounter. My holy shocks were critting for 6 to 8 million damage, and judgment was even going for 2 to 3. So the last thing to deal with in phase 3 then is to watch which ads are starting to empower, and keep in mind that they have generated threat the entire phase even though they haven't been actively tanked. So if your tanks aren't quick to pick up these ads, they will walk over and melee the Shadow Priest who's been dealing damage to them the whole time. So it's important that you as a healer keep an eye on that. If you're a paladin specifically, I know I like to bop pretty readily in this phase. So after you kill all the ads, you go through probably the coolest transition Blizzard's ever made, and you start phase 4. So in phase 4, Tortured Rage starts up again, which is the flat burst of damage done to the raid. So you'll need to be prepared to watch people who are low when this ability is about to go off and quickly spot heal them. Throughout this entire phase of the fight, Embers of Rage will be falling from the sky, which are swirlies on the ground that if somebody is standing in them when they land, it will deal a substantial amount of initial damage to them, as well as a pretty heavily ticking dot. And this dot and initial burst damage stack. So if you get hit by more than 1 or 2 of these, you'll be taking a substantial amount of ticking damage and you are likely to die. So during this phase, Orbs of Origination will be spawning throughout the room. And while it's the priority of the DPS to kill these, if you have a spare GCD or 2, you can help DPS these down, as if they're not killed, they will deal an incredible amount of damage to the raid and likely cause total wipe. So help kill the orbs if you have a spare GCD, but there's quite a bit of healing going on in this phase of the fight, so it is pretty low on your priority list. So as I just alluded to, throughout this phase of the encounter, whenever you die, you can release and run to the tree that Aeonar spawned and res. It's important to note that every time a player reses, they take energy away from the tree. And then when the tree is finally out of energy, every time a player reses, it'll apply a hard-hitting dot to the tree. And we as healers can heal the tree to keep allowing players to res. However, if the tree ever dies, we lose access to this res mechanic. So it's important that we keep an eye on the tree, but eventually it will become too much damage on the tree. We won't be able to heal through it. So that's it for this fight with respect to healers. As a paladin specifically, there are a couple of things of note. You cannot beacon the tree or cast Blessing of Sacrifice or externals on it. Unfortunately, all you can do is heal it, which is fine. It's added benefit. We're very strong as paladins that we can spot heal the tree very heavily. However, there is a ton of raid damage going on, so don't just sit there and heal the tree. You want to actually also help keep your raid alive. For talents on this fight, I would recommend the quote-unquote standard build in Bestow Faith, Rule of Law, Deversac, Holy Avenger, Judgment of Light, and Beacon of Faith. And so that's the last part of my guides on healing Heroic Antorus. I'll use the remainder of our Argus kill to just kind of have a chat about what I think of the instance in general. And for starters, I thought it was incredibly easy. They kind of went wildly the wrong direction in Antorus. I thought Tomb was, for Heroic, pretty fairly tuned, and I didn't think it needed a substantial nerf or anything. Mythic was a bit unforgiving with some of the mechanics, but in general, I think Blizzard took this too far to the easy mode. We cleared the entire instance in 3 minutes and 24, or 3 hours and 24 minutes. Yeah, 3 minute clear would be that'd be something. We had very few wipes on any of the bosses. In general, I mean, we're a Mythic raiding guild, so that might be expected, but still, it was extremely easy. Especially normal mode was laughable. Even in my family and friends guild, we kind of walked through the place. So in general, I think it's incredibly easy. That's evidenced by the fact that at the time of recording this, Mythic has been out for 24 hours and many bosses are down. It's 9 of 11 right now in the race, and I haven't checked for the last hour and a half. For all I know, Aggramar might be dead. Despite this, I don't think the instance is bad in general. I think I had a fun time healing it. I think some of the encounters are very unique, and the turret defense with A&R is an insanely unique mechanic or encounter. We've never seen anything like that. Implementing it was a little bit off. I think they undertuned it, as I mentioned, but in general, I thought it was a crazy fun thing to try. Maybe it didn't work out exactly how they wanted, but at least I tried something. In general, I think my favorite fight was King Goroth with those ad spawning was pretty cool. Felt Paladin was pretty unique, and just having that little mini intro or intermission where you got to be Shakaden for a while was pretty cool. So I could sit here and ramble all day about my thoughts on Antorus. I have quite a bit, but I just wanted to say thanks to everybody watching these. They ended up being each video quite a bit longer than I had planned. I tried not to go into too much detail about the mechanics and focus on how to heal the fight as a healer. If you like this video, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Maybe I'll be putting out mythic kill guides for each boss that we do. We are currently 2 of 11. I should have been 3, but ran out of time at the end of the night. So hopefully we'll get 3 tonight. A couple other kills this week, and every time we kill a new boss, I'll be putting out a video in the similar vein of what I learned healing this fight in Mythic then. And just in general, big thanks to everybody, and I'll see you guys in the next video.